Good morning everyone and welcome to this month's HUBsights webinar. During the month of October, we'll be showcasing all the great insurance options that are available on the HUB24 platform. And today we're delighted to be joined by Jessica Brady, Risk Strategy Specialist from Zurich, who will be taking us through 5 ways to connect with the next generation of clients. Before we start, I just need to mention a few housekeeping items. The lines will remain muted throughout the presentation to prevent any background noise. So if you have any questions, please use the webinar control panel to send them through to the team. We'll hold the Q&A session at the end once Jessica has finished her presentation. So without further ado, I'll just pass over to Jessica to take us through her presentation.
Thank you. Thanks, Anne. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your no doubt busy schedules to dial in for about 30 minutes. We're going to talk about connecting with the next generation of clients. This is part of a broader piece that Zurich's done around intergenerational advice, and we are really passionate about this topic. It's not a new one, but we think the level of engagement that needs to be considered is pretty thorough, and we'd like to take you through some ways that we've seen work really successfully. So let's kick off. Of course, our legal team would like to remind you that I have nothing to say that, nothing that I say today can be used against me. Hopefully, you've had a chance to read all of that wonderful legal jargon. Let's move right along. So I really want to talk about intergen advice, but really strongly spend the back end of today talking around how do you connect with a generation of clients that are quite different, perhaps, to the clients that you have today. So I want to talk about why. I want to give you some really interesting insights on the next generation of clients, and we've got a webcam, so you can probably see I do fit into the Gen Y bucket, so I can give you some kind of anecdotes from my perspective as well. But I really want to share with you insights from the market. So there are some phenomenal businesses that are doing really, really well in this space. So really happy to share their secrets of success. And then Zurich has got some great tools that will really help you on your advice journey when it comes to integrating with that next generation of clients. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about what are they and how can you use them inside your business. So let's kick off first by kind of setting the scene. And is there an opportunity worth chasing? Well, to be frank, we really wouldn't be here today if there wasn't. And as I said, intergenerational advice is not new, but when we look at the landscape of the advice community, what we know is that it's something that people have put on the back burner because we've been busy with regulatory change, etc. But it's really time now to start strategically thinking about how are you connecting with this next generation of clients and what, if anything, needs to change within your model. Before we kick off, I really wanted to set the scene with some really interesting and pretty startling information just around how families are discussing or not discussing wealth transfer. Because, of course, if you're talking about connecting with that next generation of clients, it is likely because your existing clients are going to be passing down their wealth to the next generation. And what we know is that families are not having these discussions at all, and it is absolutely putting their whole family cohesion in jeopardy. So this is a Canadian study, but I think the premise is still very relevant. So what it found was that 60% of Australians had a will. 59% of Australians have a will at the moment. I question how many of those are actually valid. But what we know is that most of the time, 70% of the time, when a family has a will, it's not discussed. So the contents of that will are never discussed within the family unit, and it's left to a pretty emotional time for families to find out exactly what's in that will, which can lead to a whole heap of turmoil. What they found from this Canadian study was that actually 70% of these families broke down when a will was not communicated from one generation to the next. It's a pretty startling number, so they dug deeper to work out why were so many families really having moments of distress and heartache collectively. What they found was 60% of the breakdown was caused by a lack of internal trust and communication within that family unit. 25% was caused by a failure to prepare the heirs or the next generation to receive that wealth. 10% was due to a lack of agreed upon mission for that family wealth, and 5% was due to technical errors. So I think if you look at that through the lens of the Australian landscape, we would not be too dissimilar. Families are not having these crucial conversations, and as such, they are really lending themselves to the next generation being in quite dire straits when it comes to cohesion. We think this presents an enormous opportunity for you to start really having robust discussions with your existing clients around what is the estate plan, how well has it been documented, how well has it been communicated, and how can you as the advisor take the role as that central project manager to make sure that the family truly understands what the game plan is and will naturally come to see you if and when that wealth does transfer. So hopefully that set the scene around why is this something that we should be talking about. But that really lends itself to really connecting with that next generation, because if you're going to bring that up with your existing, say, baby boomer clients, you need to connect with the next generation. And what we know from Zurich research is that not very many advisors have done that just yet. Only 22% of advisors have actually implemented intergenerational strategy within their advice business to really target and connect with that next generation of clients. And only 15% have actually built an engagement model that specifically caters to Gen X and Gen Y. And the thing to really consider here is that I, myself as a Gen Y, don't necessarily want to connect in the same way that you would connect with my parents. So it's wonderful to consider having an intergen strategy, but if you're not thinking about specific engagement differentiators, you're probably missing an opportunity there. And we're going to talk about that in more detail. So I just wanted to set the scene in terms of who is this generation, what do we know about them from an advice perspective, and what are some of the considerations for you? So over the next 30 years, it's estimated that $2.4 trillion will be passed down to this generation. So that makes their total net worth in the vicinity of about $3.6 trillion. The other thing to consider is that Bankwest came out with a recent report that said 1 in 10 homes will be transferred down to the next generation within the next 10 years. So again, going back to that earlier point, if there's discussions not being had about who exactly is getting what, it potentially causes friction down the track. This is absolutely a blue ocean opportunity for you because only 5% of this generation are currently getting advice. Yet we know that if they believe that they're getting an inheritance, 85% actually want to go and seek out an advisor, which is a really positive and comforting fact. And another alarming statistic from our perspective, and obviously we specialise in insurance, is that a lot of this generation don't know whether their biggest asset, which is their ability to earn an income, is actually protected, which leads itself to a wonderful conversation starter potentially with the parent. Another point to consider here is if you already hold a relationship with a parent, you are at a distinct advantage because what we know is that 68% of the next generation whose parents had an advisor, they do believe inherently that it is beneficial and valuable. If they did not have a parent with an advisor, that actually slides down all the way only to 8%. So if you hold the relationship already with the parent, that generation inherently believe what you do adds value and you're much more likely to connect. So are we really capitalising on the opportunity that sits in front of us? Well, unfortunately, the statistics are not great. What we know is that at the moment, only 2% of adult-age children are keeping the inheritance with the incumbent parent's financial advisor. So 98% of those children, once they've received an inheritance, are actually walking away from that advice relationship. So not only is this an opportunity for your business, it could actually be a threat in the coming years and decades if you don't really consider how are we starting to engage with these clients. What's also really interesting is that there's clearly an engagement issue when it comes to looking at both parties of a partnership. So what we know is that upon the death of a husband, actually only 45% of widows keep their assets with the same financial advisor. So 55% are choosing to step away from that relationship. This is a really alarming statistic, and I've spoken about intergenerational advice across the board at a number of different conferences, and without a doubt, one person every time will come up to me and say, I've actually had this happen where I thought as a family we held a really strong relationship with the family, our business held a really strong relationship. I was really surprised when the husband passed away and the wife chose to seek advice elsewhere. I think it's really important to think about the fact that there tends to be one person in a partnership that does take the lead on the financial affairs of a family, but that doesn't mean that can be the only relationship you hold. How do you have an engagement model that caters to perhaps the secondary relationship, and perhaps that's the wife, perhaps that's an adult age child, perhaps that's the husband? But if you're not thinking about engaging with all parties, there is absolutely a huge runoff rate, which is really interesting. So we know that only 5% of this generation get advice. Why is that? What are the big barriers to entry? Well, there's some really interesting research that's come out, and these are the top reasons why the next generation of clients are not coming to seek you out. The top one is they really believe that their financial situation doesn't warrant your time. They don't believe that what you can do is actually going to add value to them, and they believe fees are too high. From the same report where this has come from, the ING Direct report, they asked clients, if you were to get face-to-face advice, what would you be willing to pay for that? And the median number was $250. So there's clearly a value barrier when consumers believe that they can get bespoke, tailored advice for $250. And I'm going to come to that a little bit later. So we wanted to spend the back end of today's presentation really talking about how do you connect? What are we seeing in the market? What are some ideas that you might be able to take back and appropriate to your business and your business strategy? And then I'd love to leave some time for questions at the end. So if we look at what are the best businesses doing to connect with that generation, there's some pretty simple things that you can start doing straight away. The first one would be around having family tree discussions if you're not already. So what we know is that families who talk about their entire family unit actually feel more satisfied with their advisor, and they're more likely to refer their children. So actually advisors that do a family tree with every client have a higher satisfaction score on average, which is really interesting, but they also have a higher engagement with that next generation of clients, because inherently you're talking about that family unit in totality and starting to get a picture of what that family looks like, what complexities might be involved, and starting to talk about, what's important to that younger generation. Have they finished university? Have they got HECS debt? Have they bought a property, etc.? And starting to talk to the parent about what are the implications from an advice perspective. The second one's really around holding beneficiary meetings. So hopefully I set the scene earlier to really talk about the fact that this isn't a great statistic as it stands, and families are not sitting around the Christmas table talking about who gets what when the wealth does transfer. And we think that presents an enormous opportunity for you to offer your services to conduct beneficiary meetings. This is a really successful way to physically meet the next generation of clients. We know that a lot of firms are doing this already, but creating this as part of your general process has a fantastic engagement propensity. So, we've had situations where advisors have told us that their kids live overseas and they effectively Skype their kids into a roundtable meeting where the advisor actually talks thoroughly through what the estate plan looks like and really shields the parent from any of those uncomfortable questions that the children might have. It also means that if something does happen, the children know how to pick up the phone, they know who you are, they've met with you, and they're more likely to come and seek you out. The next two are pretty simple. So technology is obviously fundamental and elementary for the next generation of clients. We wake up every morning and the first thing we do is check our phone, our email, our Instagram, our Facebook. It's part of the normal life of the next generation of clients. Really think about what technology are you using at the moment. Is it speaking to the next generation of clients? Posting a blog once every 3 months is probably not the engagement level that this generation demands. And is there an opportunity for you to run competitions, say through things like Facebook or LinkedIn, where your existing clients can tag their children? We've seen some wonderful examples where, there was a photo of, say, the bank of dad and tag your kids who use you as a bank, and lots of people tagged their adult age children, and then the propensity was come and see us if you need to get a budget sorted. So there's some really clever ways that you can get your existing clients to start getting their children to have conversations about money that they're not having at the moment. The last one which we see, which is really, really simple, is around having insurance conversations. So I talked before around the fact that a large number of this generation have no idea what insurance they have. Often the response is, I've got something through super, I think. but really talking to the parents about what would the impact be on your retirement savings if something was to happen to your adult-aged kids. What would that look like? And really doing some scenario planning around how vitally important it is for those adult-aged children to have insurance, and really forecasting what the impact would be to that baby boomer client should something go wrong. We've seen a number of circumstances where advisors have done this, and actually what has ended up happening is the baby boomer clients actually pay for the insurance for the adult-aged children, because it makes far more sense for them to pay that premium than potentially lose a huge chunk of their retirement savings. So look, these are some pretty simple ideas that you would be able to adopt fairly quickly within your business strategy. But I want to go a bit deeper and talk to you about what are the advisors doing that really focus solely on this market. And here's a few examples. We've kind of spent a lot of time interviewing them and going deep on what is it that you do, how do you connect with these clients, what are they looking for that's different, and this really brings us to kind of the 5 different strategies that we want to talk through. So I guess the first thing to understand is that unfortunately, a lot of the next generation really do think that the concept of financial advice or financial planning is boring. They associate it with things like retirement, with superannuation, with estate planning, with insurance. None of that is particularly exciting or sexy for them. So it's really about understanding what makes them tick and what's going to engage them. What's really interesting is whilst they think that financial advice is boring, ironically, they like all of the components of advice. So, you know, they like the concept of budgeting and really having someone as, say, a personal CFO to keep them on track. They like property. They're very experiential driven. So what we know about the next generation of clients is that most of them would much prefer to use their funds to have an experience than to purchase something physical, which is really interesting. And they like to be in control. So this is a generation who can access anything, anytime, anywhere. How do we make their information accessible to them when they're on the bus or waiting for their coffee? It's really important to understand intrinsically what they're looking for from an advice relationship to make sure that your service offer fits with that. The second thing to really consider is how do you stand out and how do you differentiate yourself and really speak to this community from an online perspective. So we think it's about building something called a tribe. So a tribe of people that follow you in your business and really seek out your advice and seek your opinions on all things financially related. So this might be because you have a regular podcast where you deliver value, or a blog, you're an author, whether you're utilising social media. What we think is that you really need to create a huge tribe of people who are willing to engage with you, share your content, watch your videos, read your blogs, because that really does reduce the trust barrier that does exist with financial advice. And there's phenomenal software that you can use looking at kind of inbound marketing so that clients can access your information quickly and easily, and you're also able to track exactly what's resonating and perhaps what you need to pivot on. The other thing to consider is really around how do you commoditize your tribe. So it's one thing to build a wonderful tribe of clients or potential clients, but if you're not monetizing that, then obviously that's a huge amount of your time and effort gone for very little return. It's really worth understanding that you cannot just build one piece of content and hope to receive a flurry of leads or inquiries. That's not how it works. It's about being very strategic with this generation and dripping them meaningful and relevant content. If you're producing content online that talks about the superannuation changes, that's wonderful for a certain segment, but that's not necessarily going to appeal to a younger demographic. So think about how can you provide bite-sized chunks of information. They call it a drip, drip, drip marketing campaign. So you're dripping meaningful and relevant content, and then only once you've really built that trust and credibility, you're able to commoditize or sell. I want to give you an example of that. This is a really interesting one. This lady's name is Adele Martin. She's an advisor based in Newcastle. Probably one of the best examples I've seen of an online tribal community. She's created something called the Saving Squad. This is on Facebook. It's got about 700 members, but it's growing at a fairly rapid rate. It's a closed group of people who share information about how to save. So, she gives tips on what books to read, and she really tries to foster this very kind of community-style engagement around how do people save money, which means that she doesn't need to produce content each and every day. Her tribe or her community do that for her. What you'll notice on the top right-hand side is that she's also underpinned this with pretty simple but effective technology. So when we signed up to the Savings Squad, we were asked for some pretty basic information, including our name and our mobile phone number, and we received an automated text. So what you can see there is my colleague Danny received a text welcoming us to the Savings Squad, which is a pretty nice thing to have happen, and just gave a little bit of information about what happens in that community and things to look out for. So from an engagement perspective, Adele is front of mind for me if I am considering getting financial advice or getting in control of my money. A really simple and clever way to engage or create a tribe. I've talked a little bit about trust barriers, but I want to talk about this through the lens of the next generation of clients. What we know is that the next generation of clients are very anti-institutional. We know that they are not overly comfortable with the concept of financial advisors. They've grown up with the GFC, etc. And so it's really worth understanding that trust has changed and trust has shifted. What we know now through things like Airbnb and Uber is that trust is now built by communities of like-minded people. So if I see people who look like me endorsing something, a product or a service, I am much more likely to feel comfortable adopting that product or service in my life. This is the best example we've found from an advisor perspective. This is an advisor business based in Sydney and Melbourne. And what you can see quite simply is that they have created a part of their website that gives testimonials. So you can see there's a range of their clients, and if I was to click on any of those clients' photos, it actually talks about how this business helps them achieve their goals. So what we know is that if you're looking to target that kind of younger demographic, if I was on their website, I could really easily click around and see the different unique experiences that these people have had, and then of course their endorsement of that business, which makes me as a potential customer feel very confident that if they were able to help those people achieve financial success, why could they not do the same for me? I think this is a really interesting example because most businesses I speak to do actually receive client testimonials, and they do have quite a lot of advocates that will, refer family and friends. It's about how do you put that in a technological landscape, because the next generation of clients will go online to look you up. And the last one really is around thinking about what is going to inspire your clients. How do you engage with them? How do you speak the same language? I mentioned earlier that this generation is not interested in things like superannuation, retirement, estate planning. They want you to talk to them in a language that's friendly for them. Here's a wonderful example of a business based in Melbourne. They work with kind of 25 to 40-year-old clients, and what they realised was a common question they received was, I'm not quite sure whether I should invest in property or I should invest in shares. So I had a pretty simple idea around why don't we hold an education event that actually talks about the pros and cons of both. So that's exactly what they did. They held an event in Melbourne. They actually charged clients $40 a ticket to attend, and they sold out. Remember, this younger generation is very happy to pay for content that they feel is meaningful and relevant. So they're very happy to pay if they feel they're being educated and they're going to walk out smarter, but not necessarily being sold to. What they also did was a series of pretty funny little videos on Facebook. So you can see the advisor there kind of in some boxing gear because they called it a fight night. And all of the kind of language and all of the imagery was really around this concept of a fight night, which kind of really resonated with that audience. And I think this is a wonderful example of the next generation of advisors really thinking strategically about what do our clients want to see from us, how can we not be seen as kind of a traditional, dare I say, boring kind of financial advice firm. We want to be differentiated, we want to be different. This is not hard to replicate. This is pretty simple and hopefully gives you a good idea around how the younger demographic of clients want to be engaged with. So I feel like we've gone a little bit around the world in kind of 2.1 days. I've given you a bit of a crash course in the next generation of clients and why it's really strategically important for you to think about what are you doing in this space, and hopefully some tips and tricks on what are the best advice businesses doing that really target that demographic. I should also point out, I know I mentioned earlier that the research said that many clients were not willing to pay more than $250 for bespoke advice, which not many people, if anyone, can deliver. All of those businesses actually charge more than that a month. So clearly when that next generation of clients can see the value that you are providing, they're very happy to pay for your services. So I just want to spend a little bit of time now talking to you about one tool that we have. Sometimes it can be lovely to kind of go to these sessions and to get educated on, what should we be thinking about. But it can be quite tough when you go back to your desk to think about, well, how do we start? Where do we start? So I want to show you one tool that we've created, because hopefully that will help you pretty quickly plug and play into this next generation of clients. We've built something called the Wealth Index tool. It is non-branded, so it is white labeled. You'll see there that there's no Zurich logos or even colours really anywhere, just a tiny one down the bottom. The idea is that you would register for the Wealth Index tool. You would provide some basic information on you, so your name, your email address, and then you need to provide a photo of you because you receive a unique URL. You can use your business logo. Really what this is a health check. So you can send clients a link. It is mobile compatible, so for that next generation of clients who probably want to do everything on a phone, they can log in and within kind of a minute self-select how they're going from a financial perspective, and then at the end of that they receive a score. You can see here that score is 52%, which is not amazing, and they get a report. They can also choose to share that report if they want. So what we're seeing a lot of advisors who use this tool do is actually ask their existing clients to get the email address of their kids, send it to their kids, and their kids complete a 1 or 2 minute financial health score, and it really provides the basis for the conversation for you to pick up the phone and talk about, we saw your score results, how did you feel, did you want to come in and talk about these, etc. So if you are wanting access to that tool, please reach out to your Zurich BDM. We're really happy to make that available to you, and we receive reports on how often it's being used, how long clients are staying on the site, etc. So thank you so much. I hope I've given you some kind of food for thought on how to connect with the next generation of clients. I'm really happy to take any questions if there are any.
Great, thanks Jessica. There's some really great case studies in there about what advisors are doing, particularly on social media. I was interested to read over the weekend that there's a new micro generation being created, those born between 1977 and 1983, who were analog growing up and digital adults. So
that's a really interesting one.
Yeah. So look, we've had a couple of questions come through. So somebody has asked, how long does it take for an advisor to get traction with clients on social media?
Yeah, that's a good one. So what they say, so it's a slow burn. As I mentioned earlier, you can't just kind of produce one piece of content a quarter and think that you've kind of nailed social media. Sam Henderson, who's the Practice of the Year winner of this year, really talked a lot about his ROI from doing a lot of kind of public relations and media, and he said it took him 18 months to get traction, and he does quite a lot from a media perspective. What they say from a social perspective is it takes about 8 to 12 interactions to go from a complete stranger to your potential prospect to someone where they see you as, I guess, the pinnacle of that topic, or all things financial, being a financial guru, and only then do you really have the opportunity to commoditize. So definitely a slow burn, but it absolutely can pay dividends from an ROI perspective.
Right, so be prepared to stick it out.
Stick it out the long haul. And can I make one more comment on that? Some financial advisors are actually building out quarterly social media calendars. So, you know, it can be quite stressful if you haven't got anything planned for that week, and building content on the fly really does lead it to fall down. So really think strategically, and you can go online. There's a lot of different tools to help you create a bank of quality content so that you're not always chasing your tail trying to find something that's useful.
Sounds like a great idea. And one more question. You mentioned a few different ways that advisors can help engage their baby boomer clients' children. What are some of the ways that, or what is maybe the way that has worked, you've seen work the best?
Yeah, so I think if I was just going to boil it down to one concept that's worked the best, it's the beneficiary meetings. I think that is because you're physically getting them into the office. They know where your office is, they've seen you, you're a real human, you've done kind of eye to eye, belly to belly. You know, in that moment of crisis, if something does happen to one of the parents, they will look to you for leadership and support. If they hadn't kind of seen you, would they be as likely to pick up the phone and talk to a stranger? I'm not quite sure. So we know that has had a tremendous impact on those businesses that are doing this really well.
Yeah.
And most children are quite happy to come to learn about what they're expected to receive.
I'm sure. So I guess it's not only about the digital and the technology side, it's also about building a relationship with those clients' children as well.
Yeah. Look, we are in a relationship business, and technology should be an enhancer to that. This is not a detractor from a relationship perspective. The next generation of clients do want you to connect digitally to them, but they also want that relationship. There's a wonderful, just going on your concept before, there's a wonderful concept of, you know, an analog heart but a digital mind.
Yes.
Which I really like the concept of. At the heart, we want to connect with people, but we do want things to be digital as well.
Fantastic. Well, that's all the questions, so we'll wrap up for today. Thank you very much for everybody who joined us today. Thank you to Jessica from Zurich. If you would like to get in contact with Zurich or one of their BDMs, we're happy to facilitate that through HUB24, so please reach out to your BDM to do that. And thanks very much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.